Battlefield Vietnam, 2004. The guerrilla pattern. Set between 1965 and 1968, Battlefield Vietnam made the Viet Cong a fully playable faction opposite the United States Marine Corps and the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. It was the first battlefield to give asymmetry mechanical weight, the VC spawn closer to objectives, deploy faster on foot, and trade firepower for positioning. Typical maps: Hue 1968, Operation Flaming Dart, and Ho Chi Minh Trail showcase the militia's advantages. Booby traps hidden in elephant grass, recoilless rifles mounted on jeeps, and tunnel networks under villages turn the landscape into a weapon. American teams arrive with helicopters and napalm, the VC reply with patience and proximity. In Ho Chi Minh Trail, US forces push up a valley while the Viet Cong respawn in concealed dugouts behind enemy lines, emphasizing the illusion that they are everywhere and nowhere. The gameplay teaches that guerrilla success depends on rhythm, not raw numbers. The faction's reliance on captured gear and local logistics anticipates every irregular army that would follow in Battlefield's chronology. Battlefield 2, Special Forces, 2005. Urban Insurgency. The Special Forces expansion modernized irregular warfare. It introduced the Insurgents and the Rebels, two fictional groups representing the new century's decentralized conflicts. On maps such as Warlord, set in London's Docklands, and Ghost Town, based on Chechnya's ruined cities, players see how these paramilitaries fight. The Insurgents favor technical trucks with mounted machine guns, RPG-7s, and improvised bombs. The Rebels field camouflage that blends with urban rubble, reflecting a militia hardened by street fighting. Gameplay gadgets became doctrine. Grappling hooks and zip lines replaced tanks as the symbols of mobility. Gas grenades and night vision goggles turned darkness into an ally. The expansion's asymmetrical equipment lists made insurgency tactile. A handful of players slipping over rooftops could capture a command point from a mechanized foe. Narratively, the insurgents are described as a loose Middle Eastern coalition, rising after the fall of conventional regimes. The rebels, by contrast, are framed as a breakaway Eastern European movement reclaiming territory from occupation. Both demonstrate the franchise's interest in how wars are fought, rather than who officially declares them. Battlefield. Bad Company, 2008. Mercenaries with a ledger. The modern era of corporate warfare begins here. Bad Company replaces anonymous insurgents with the Legionnaire Mercenaries, a professional private army, commanded by the mysterious Legionnaire, whose fortune in gold finances an entire war. The campaign opens in the fictional nation of Sardaristan, where the player's Unit B Company pursues both military orders and personal gain. Missions such as Crossing Over and Crash and Grab feature clashes with the Legionnaire's armored columns and helicopter escorts. Their soldiers wear desert-pattern fatigues without national insignia, speak in multiple languages, and deploy NATO-grade hardware, from AH-64-style gunships to T-90 tanks. In Par for the Course, players assault a golf course villa defended by mercenaries guarding bullion shipments, blending satire and lethality. The Legionnaire himself appears only through intercepted communications, describing his troops as investments. This choice gives the faction mythic distance, turning the mercenary commander into capitalism's ghost of war. Mechanically, Bad Company was the first Battlefield title to feature fully destructible environments via the Frostbite engine. For the Legionnaire's men, that destruction is policy. They level towns to erase debts. They build no bases because property is transient. Every explosion in Bad Company becomes an economic statement. Assets in play, collateral irrelevant. Battlefield. Bad Company 2, 2010. Proxies and pretexts. Bad Company 2 escalates its predecessor's satire into a global chase, trading gold for geopolitics. The campaign stretches from Alaska to the Andes and introduces the Latin American militia, a regional irregular force that serves as the Russians' local proxy during their covert operation to recover a weapon of mass disruption codenamed Aurora. The militia's presence defines the Heart of Darkness and upriver missions, where ambushes unfold in jungle corridors threaded with rivers and shantytowns. Fighters in mismatched camouflage use AK variants and grenade launchers, improvising defenses with oil drums and sandbags. Their command structure is fragmented, leaders rather than generals, mirroring real insurgent networks across Latin America. Mechanically, the militia differs from the disciplined Russian army that later appears in the campaign. They fight close, moving through the foliage and attacking supply convoys before disappearing. The player's squad advances through their territory in battered jeeps and commandeered boats, the firefights scored to chaotic radio chatter in Spanish. When B Company finally breaks the Russian link, the militia dissolves instantly, proving their loyalty was transactional. In-universe, they exist as the perfect deniable layer between superpower ambition and local desperation. Battlefield 3, 2011, the brand of insurgency with Battlefield 3. DICE shifted tone from comedy to paranoia. Its central antagonists, the People's Liberation and Resistance, PLR, exemplify the idea of the modern paramilitary as a global brand. The PLR's black and red insignia adorns propaganda posters, broadcast studios, and street murals throughout the campaign. The group is led by Farouk al-Bashir, an Iranian nationalist figurehead manipulated by the ex-CIA operative Solomon, who uses the PLR to stage terrorist attacks designed to provoke nuclear confrontation. Missions like Operation Swordbreaker and Uprising throw the player's squad, Misfit 1 into street battles in Sulaymaniyah and Tehran, where the PLR fight as disciplined urban soldiers. They occupy high-rise apartments, rig alleys with explosives, and coordinate using civilian vehicles as cover. In Going Hunting, the PLR surface indirectly through arms smuggling to the Russian ultranationalists, illustrating how paramilitary groups thrive as intermediaries between ideologies. The mission Kafarov introduces another layer: private contractors protecting the eponymous arms dealer in a Georgian villa. These PMCs, Russian-speaking but stateless, wield identical kit to formal armies: Scar H rifles, light body armor, and communications jammers. Their professionalism contrasts with the PLR's zeal, showing two faces of modern irregular warfare, one animated by conviction, the other by profit. The Kafarov Maps Villa, complete with heliports and golf course bunkers, later reappears in multiplayer, an Easter egg that cements PMCs as embedded fixtures in Battlefield's world design. Battlefield 3, Co-op, 2011. Contractors in the Shadows. The cooperative missions expand the paramilitary theme further. In Hit and Run and Exfiltration, players face contractor units protecting criminal financiers and intelligence assets. The absence of uniforms, the Western-made weapons, and the procedural tactics leapfrogging cover. Disciplined fire control indicate a workforce drawn from disbanded special forces. The game never names their employer, but their ubiquity implies that private armies have become standard logistics in modern conflict. Each firefight feels like an NDA made flesh. Battlefield 4, 2013. Law, Order, and the Limits of Labels. Battlefield 4 brings the series back to total war, but keeps a trace of paramilitary chaos visible through its world building. The antagonists, Admiral Chang's People's Liberation Army, are unmistakably state forces. Yet the city of Shanghai, where the campaign begins, hosts a landscape of privatized security and public disorder. In the mission Singapore Harbor, the player passes through districts patrolled by armored riot police and private guards, wearing non-standard insignia. These aren't playable factions, but their presence hints that internal control has already shifted from public to contracted hands. During Tashgar and Suez, communications chatter references independent logistics groups, supplying both sides. Battlefield's quiet nod to the invisible economies of war that PMCs and smugglers sustain. Mechanically, BF4's destruction and naval combat push the spectacle back toward conventional military action, but its backdrop, megacities policed by hybrids of law enforcement and corporate agents, bridges the gap between the PLR's ideological wars and the fully privatized conflicts to come in Battlefield 2042. Battlefield Hardline, 2015. Crime as an Army. Battlefield Hardline reframes the franchise's warfare into domestic conflict, yet the Criminals faction behaves more like a paramilitary outfit than a street gang. Across the campaign's episodes, Backfire, Out of Business, and Hotshot organize crime syndicates in Miami, Los Angeles, and the Everglades, deploy armored convoys, attack helicopters, and rocket launchers. The narrative's protagonist, Nick Mendoza, begins as a detective, but quickly learns that the cartels and their corrupted law enforcement partners operate as self-contained armies. Their leaders, such as Captain Julian Dawes and Captain Stoddard, are police officials who privatize their authority, transforming state power into personal enterprise. In multiplayer, the dynamic solidifies. Criminals fight law enforcement over cash drops, vehicles, and territory. Maps like Downtown, Bank Job, and Everglades highlight how a criminal economy militarizes itself. Technicals bristle with M249 machine guns. Stolen military radios coordinate ambushes, and strongholds are fortified with construction equipment and ballistic shields. Mechanically, Hardline emphasizes speed and improvisation. Criminal players hotwire sedans, deploy portable zip lines between high-rises, and convert sports cars into battering rams. Police rely on armored vans and stun weaponry, reflecting a gradual escalation of law enforcement into quasi-military engagement. Thematically, Hardline extends Battlefield's examination of profit-driven violence. Here, the battlefield is urban, the loot literal, and the uniforms irrelevant. The war on crime becomes a mirror of mercenary warfare. Hierarchies built not on patriotism, but on payouts. Battlefield 1, 2016. Resistance as Strategy. When DICE returned to World War I for Battlefield 1, it resurrected the oldest form of paramilitary warfare, rebellion against empire. The war story Nothing Is Written follows Zara Gufran, an agent of the Arab revolt under T.E. Lawrence, fighting Ottoman control in the Arabian desert. The campaign opens with the mission The Spy from Cairo, where Zara infiltrates a desert fortress using stolen uniforms and silent melee attacks. The mechanics reward stealth, knife takedowns, distractions, and use of silenced pistols instead of heavy weapons, translating the tactics of insurgency into gameplay language. Later, in Young Men's Work, Lawrence and Zara ambush an armored train named Canavar, a moving fortress equipped with anti-aircraft guns and heavy artillery. The player disables rail lines with dynamite and uses captured field guns to stop the train, illustrating how resistance movements convert industrial technology into vulnerability. In multiplayer, the paramilitary flavor returns through Operation Gallipoli in Sinai Desert, where Bedouin riders on horseback charge against British armor, bridging myth and history. Their katanas, rifles, and horses embody asymmetry as spectacle, speed, and knowledge of terrain replacing sheer firepower. Zara Gufran herself stands as one of Battlefield's most human portraits of rebellion, a woman soldier whose loyalty is to liberation rather than hierarchy. Her dialogue with Lawrence in the final cutscene encapsulates Battlefield's philosophy of irregular warfare. We are not an army, but we can make an army remember us. Battlefield 1. Multiplayer. the unspoken militias, beyond its war stories. Battlefield 1's multiplayer reinforces the same non-state motifs. Certain map introductions, such as Empire's Edge and Achi Baba, reference volunteer battalions and partisans folded into the wider war. The Behemoth system, a player-controlled dreadnought or armored train that appears for the losing team, functions symbolically as the moment when a nation turns to extraordinary, often irregular, measures to balance the field. Even the Flame Trooper and Sentry Elites evoke historical prototypes of semi-autonomous shock units that blurred the line between regular army and private detachment. Battlefield 5, 2018. Saboteurs in the Snow. Battlefield 5 returns to World War II and places a resistance cell at the heart of a war story. Nordlys follows Solveig Fia Bjørnstad in occupied Norway as she undertakes a sabotage campaign against heavy water production that could accelerate nuclear research. The opening infiltration across the frozen plateau frames the resistance as an economy of motion. Skiing replaces trucks, the knight replaces armor, and a hand-thrown charge replaces artillery. The facility at Vimork, based on real geography near Rjukan, becomes a puzzle of patrol routes, floodlights, and cargo trams. The player's tools are reduced on purpose. Knives, suppressed pistols, and stashed explosives ask for patience and improvisation rather than spectacle. When the alarms inevitably blare, the counterattack is immediate and personal. A sprint downhill through snow and shadows with troops firing blindly into the dark. Nordlys develops its paramilitary identity through character as much as mechanics. Solveig's dialogue with her captured mother reveals the ethic of resistance in miniature. Liberation is measured not in kilometers, but in the actions that make oppression unstable. The heavy water plant, train lines, and bridge pylons become strategic targets, but the war story never lets the player forget that these objectives are embedded in villages where footsteps creak on wood floors and the smell of fuel drifts across the yard. Resistance is a local art, as much as a national project. It survives because people teach each other how to move without being seen. Multiplayer extends the mood through map curation and kit behavior. Narvik's harbor fights and Fjell 6522's Alpine ridgelines lean on verticality and visibility, while bleeding-edge German weapons share the field with misfit rifles and captured gear. Reinforcements like the Sturmtiger and V1 Streaks announce the power of states. Yet the tempo of infantry skirmishes around depots and farmsteads belongs to small teams moving on foot. Battlefield 5's weapon balance, strong recoil, slow heals, bandage reliance, quietly favors squads that coordinate like a cell. Paramilitary craft becomes the grammar of survival even when the flags over objectives are national. Battlefield 2042, 2021. Stateless by necessity. Battlefield 2042 imagines a mid-century defined by storms, famine, and migration, on a scale that dissolves the traditional idea of citizenship. Out of this disruption emerged the non-patriated, no-pats collectives of engineers, soldiers, medics, and displaced families who assemble armed task forces to secure resources and data, hire out protection, or prosecute grudges. In place of a campaign, Battlefield 2042 builds lore around specialists and locations that imply a conflict fought less for territory than for infrastructure. The heat-glossed avenues of Hourglass and Doha turn sandstorms into concealment for mixed detachments raiding the buried tram station. The gantry crane lanes of Orbital in Kourou, French Guiana, turn a rocket launch into a correlation between narrative and mechanics, as no-pad operators seize the pad to force strategic decisions. The container labyrinth of Manifest on Brawny Island reframes a port as a smuggler's cathedral where forklifts and floodlights narrate a supply chain that belongs to whoever can physically hold the aisles. Specialists personify the factions without flags. Santiago Dozer Espinoza carries a ballistic shield that converts open streets into movable cover, the kind of object a stateless unit would prize because it multiplies the value of a single operator. Wiku's Casper Van Daal deploys a reconnaissance drone that marks armor for anti-vehicle teams, an airborne proxy that lets a 4-person cell fight a tank battalion on its own terms. Emma Sundance Rosier glides between rooftops on a wingsuit with micro-darts that track vehicles. Mobility becomes an ideology. The equipment is modern, but the logic is ancient. Paramilitaries are strongest when they can decide where to stand and when to vanish. The No-Pat story coalesces around Oz, a charismatic leader who routes stateless specialists into ad hoc task forces. His operations blur motives. Some sorties stabilize grid infrastructure after a cyclone. Others target data centers to seize proprietary weather models. Others still involve satellite uplinks that can redirect surveillance or shut down positioning systems across a continent. On Renewal in Egypt, the dual biome map desert panels divided by irrigated rectangles showcases how a team without a country fights for the conditions that make any country livable. Solar arrays and water pumps are objectives, but they are also morals. Control them and refugees stay. Lose them and refugees move. The maps are dotted with details that keep the fiction grounded. On Kaleidoscope in Songdo, water features, parks, and corporate towers create a surface of calm while the underground server rooms and sky bridges host firefights over data and access. Breakaway in Antarctica turns ice caverns into echo chambers for rifles and skirmishes around a derrick that creaks like a ship. Exposure in the Canadian Rockies tears a research complex into a cliff face and asks players to plan vertical insertions with the patience of mountaineers. Every space tells the same story. When states fail to guarantee certainty, groups that can move fast and act locally inherit the keys. Battlefield 2042, the Archangel Legend. Mercenary infrastructure. The Archangel Legion arrives as the private military arm of Archangel Corporation during the Archangel Directive events, the first battlefield faction to wear a corporate logo with the confidence of a national flag. Where the No-Pats are volunteer networks stitched together by circumstance and persuasion, the Legion is a product line. Their operators appear in standardized gear with discipline coded into their posture, and their objective sets read like contract clauses: seize uplink nodes, control relay towers, extract encrypted drives, and deny services to rival actors. The control mode's rhythm capturing and holding arrays of nodes that power broader systems mirrors how an enterprise thinks about force. Stability is measured not in parades, but in uptime. The Archangel Legion's presence clarifies Battlefield's view of modern paramilitary hierarchy. It is not just soldiers for hire. It is the agreement between a boardroom and a battlefield that value flows in both directions. A successful node capture bumps a graph in an office. A lost relay triggers an investor call. The Archangel iconography, broadcast across helmets, drones, and signage, is not decoration. It is a user interface for war as a service. In encounters against Legion units, the fiction of statelessness dissolves. Sovereignty belongs to whoever can invoice it. The contrast with the No-Pats focuses on the series' long-running theme. The No-Pats are necessarily organized. The Legion is profit-organized. Their missions overlap in form but diverge in meaning. A satellite redirected by a No-Pat cell preserves an agricultural corridor. The same satellite captured by Archangel amends a quarterly report. Battlefield 2042 turns this contrast into gameplay friction by placing both groups in identical spaces and asking the player to decide which story they want the firefight to tell.